Hi, this is Beth Gerry. This is my discussion post-response in regards to the borderline personality disorder clients that we read about and reviewed this week. I don't have any experience with BPD clients. I mostly work with active duty military, but it's interesting to me because I've actually believed for some time that my mom has BPD. Now that I've seen these videos and done this reading, I don't know that I think she does, but that will tie into my lingering question at the end of the video. So the first thing I'm going to address is the normal client versus the two girls with BPD that we saw, and the similarities between the mentalization and the transference focus approaches. So with the mentalization, it seemed like with the normal client, as she was having the conversation, it was a little more natural, and she kind of came to her own conclusions. Saying things out loud with the therapist helped her to realize like that she was afraid of repeating certain behaviors with her relationship with her mother, with her relationship with her own daughter. She was very aware of her mother being really reliant on her father, and she didn't want to be that same way. She wanted to be more independent, but she was also afraid of having no one if things didn't work out, if her husband did run into a fatal situation with his health. So the mentalization portion of it just seemed like a little bit more natural, whereas with the BPD patients, they could kind of grasp that, but they really had to be led to it. They were self-aware enough to realize, like, oh, I'm afraid you're going to drop me as a therapist. I'm afraid my boyfriend is going to break up with me because he didn't want to cuddle. Those little things were so huge to them. I'm afraid that you don't care about me because you were 5 minutes late to this session, or that another client is more important than me, and things like that. But they still were able to come to it. I felt like, after lots of repeating, they were kind of stuck on it, but it was the repetition of the discussion with the therapist that helped them kind of work through it, and for the therapist to finally help them realize that, that might not be the consequence of what's going on or the case when something is happening. The first patient, she said, I will remember before I come to my next session that you told me you would not break up with me, or you would not end our client therapy relationship. I'm not quoting exactly, but you get the gist. And the same thing with the second patient. She was able to repeat back what she would be, how he was asking her to think of it. The transference focused approaches were like a little bit more, I'm sorry, I have to look at my notes. So the depression and the anxiety, the normal patient was really able to just pinpoint, like, this makes me feel anxious, this makes me feel depressed. She wasn't like identifying herself as clinically anxious or clinically depressed. She was just kind of saying it in a more socially acceptable way. This makes me anxious and depressed, just like the average person would about a stressful situation in her life. Whereas the other two girls, they were definitely able. They were both, had suicidal thoughts, were self-mutilating. They were both really overreacting to situations in their lives, and they were actually fell more into the definition of clinical depression or clinical anxiety, but were just a little bit more resistant to, like, talking about that or thinking about fixing it. So the therapies compared, they didn't compare really. It was crazy because with the normal client, it was a little bit more of a conversation. And I guess one thing you could say is all three of these women found a safe place with their therapist. Even if the two borderline patients at first felt very on edge, very anxious and very uncomfortable in the session, they eventually were able to become a little more at ease and comfortable. And the first client, the normal client, definitely felt at ease, and that she had a good rapport with the therapist. She even mentioned how she talked to her friends, but she really felt like this was more of a safe space. And, she implied that she was leaning on her friends a bit too much, but that in therapy, it's like okay to lean on the therapist. So that was a really good thing for her. And then the two borderline girls, they definitely ended up feeling like they could lean on the therapist and say the really difficult things that they needed to say. It was just harder to get them to that conclusion, and to break down all the walls and the barriers that they were putting up before they get there. So my lingering question, I actually have two, sorry. So my first lingering question is, now that I've seen these borderline patients this closely, is anyone, like, in your experience, are these borderline patients ever able to gain a sense of self? Because that is the hardest thing, is to watch the insecurity and the highly developed defenses that they have. That it makes me sad for them. It's so hard. So are they ever able to, just walk down the street with all that fear and anxiety in their heads? And then I guess my other question is personal, because I do think that have thought for a long time that my mom suffers from this condition. The reason is because she behaves in a way that you would think her inner monologue is exactly like what we hear these two female patients with BPD going on. It's just they're saying it out loud. She would never say out loud, "I'm afraid you're going to leave me. I'm afraid you're not going to want to come back." She has an extremely highly developed sense of pride and ego that, she behaves that way, but it's in an indignant kind of sense. She would never, the behavior, the actions, and the words that she does say would lead you to think that that's what's going on inside, but it would never come outside. So those are my two lingering questions, I guess. One for people with experience and one for people without, or actually they're both for people with experience. I'm sorry. Okay, that's enough of me rambling. Thank you so much for this interesting assignment. Thanks for watching. Bye.